Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite sales book. Yes, if you wake me out of a dead sleep and you ask me, Victor, what is your favorite sales book? I will always answer Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. Now, there's been other great books published, and they're great, but Spin Selling to me is its core. You know what I mean? It's the core of selling, because spin selling is all about a strategy for asking questions to develop the need and the pain. Really dig into the pain of the customer, because our job as salespeople is to move people from a point of complacency to where they're concerned enough to take action. Because if they're complacent, that means they're aware of the problem, but they're not really ready to take action. But if we can create a sense of urgency and move them to the concern side, then they'll take action and buy your product or your service. Now, I'm going to go through the SPIN model. So if you're familiar with spin selling, and this book was written in 1987 based on a study, I believe, of 35,000 sales reps. And I know what you're probably thinking at this point, 1987, Victor, that's a bit old. Well, I know things have changed, i.e. the internet, but this model still applies. It's a great model. And I'm going to give you some ideas for how you can mold it for today's business. And let me just start out with that if you want to use the spin model, you can still use it, but you have to keep in mind that today's customer is more informed. They have more knowledge. Some people say they're 50 to 70% into the buying cycle, which means they've already done the research. They've gone online. They've checked the competitors out. So they're armed with great information. So when you're using the spin model, back in 1987, we can almost say pre-internet, customers didn't have a lot of information. So you could really literally use the spin model to ask a lot of probing questions. I think today, fast forward, we're now into the internet era. People have now done their research. They know who your competitors are. They know a lot about your products that you really don't want to dwell too much on asking what I call the silly questions. Do your research ahead of time. Go on LinkedIn, go to their website, find out who they are, find out what their needs are, learn about the industry. But still, the spin model still applies if you respect the fact that our customers are smarter than they used to be back in 1987. So what is the spin model? Well, SPIN stands for situation questions, problem questions, implication questions, and need payoff questions. So SPIN, S, situation, P, problem, I, implication, and need payoff. Let's go through these real quick. So let's say that you've done your research, and again, I'm adapting it for today's market. You've done some research, but you still want to understand what's going on with the customer. So let's say you visit the customer, you're having a one-on-one discussion, and you're going to ask situation questions. This is like background information. Now already, you've gathered a lot of background information, but maybe there's more detail that you'd like to know. For example, there's only so much information you can get off the website. There's only so much information you can get off of LinkedIn. There are still some questions that you can ask to really try to understand the context of their business, how they're doing, and some of the changes that you see and maybe what they're seeing from their perspective. So what you're doing is you're asking situation questions like, what's going on with the market? What are some of the things you're seeing, Mr. Customer? By the way, these new regulations came out from the government. How does that impact your business? Policy changes, how does that impact your business? X company just announced that they're going to invest more money in this market sector. How do you see that impacting your business? And when you're asking these questions, you're really looking for problems, concerns that they may have. Because if there are changes in the market, which there always are, new competitors, substitute products, people coming in cheaper, on the supplier side, the buyer side, these companies are under a lot of pressure. So that asking the right situation questions, you may start extracting some of the problems that the company may now be facing because of these interruptions in the market, these changes in the market. And once you get a hold of one or two of these problems, then what you're going to have to do is say, okay, so I can see that that's going to be a problem, Mr. Customer. Then you immediately pivot towards the implication. If this happens because of this new policy, that means your problem is X. And because you have this problem now, what does that mean for your business? Mr. Customer, how is that going to impact, do you think, your revenues? How are you going to insulate yourself from competitors? How about reducing costs? Is there any way that you can reduce costs, or how will it impact costs? So forth and so on. And what you're trying to do is get an idea and have the customer begin to think of an idea or the ideas of how this is impacting his business. Look, there's something called an availability heuristic. An availability heuristic is that there's something that you've heard recently, like if I mention whale right now, right, and tomorrow somebody's talking about fishes, you're going to think whale because you just heard it. That's the availability heuristic, right? By planting these things in the customer's mind, what's going on in the market, what are the implications of these new problems, the customer now begins to really think about these things, and you're sitting there with them, thinking along there with them, say, hey, how are you going to, protect your revenues? How are you going to reduce your costs? If you want to expand market share, how is this going to impact you? And when you start adding all these things up, what does that really mean? And at this point, you've developed, again, you've highlighted the problem. Now you're really digging into the implications of what this really means to the customer, which leads you to the need payoff. The need payoff is basically, if you were to make these changes, if I had a solution that could help you with this and you were to make these changes, how do you see that changing for you? In other words, what you're now asking the customer is almost to pivot, turn, and say, if we were to change these things, if we were to insulate ourselves from these market changes by using my product or my service, if you were to make certain changes like that, Mr. Customer, how would you feel about that? How would that position you within your company, personally, your company as a whole? How would that impact you? What are some of the positive benefits that you see by making these changes? And what you're trying to get from the customer is for them to tell you that if we make these changes, we can be successful. See, this is what's powerful about the spin model. It gives you a structure, just a straight structure for you to go through the questioning process without having to remember a lot of things. Listen carefully again. First, you want to know, what's the situation? What's going on, Mr. Customer? Then, once you're talking about the situation, changes in the market, interruptions and all that, you're going to start talking about problems that potentially will emerge from these changes. And then, beyond the problems, now that you've identified some of the problems, Mr. Customer, what are some of the implications to you or your company? And then, if we were to fix these or resolve these, what would be the benefits to you? In other words, the buyer's state of mind is saying, you want to put them in that space where they start thinking about the positive benefits of making a change. Now, also keep in mind is that sometimes you're going to walk into a customer's office and they're going to go straight to the problem, or maybe even talk about the implications of all the changes in the market. So it's not that you have to start at S and go P-I-N. Sometimes you have to go to I and then back up and go to the problem and the situation. In other words, the customer says, we're losing money, our revenues are down, costs are not good, they're going through the roof, our market share is shrinking. Well, they went straight to the implication of how it's impacting them. What you need to do is zoom back and say, well, let's talk about some of the issues that you're facing. What's the situation? And let's talk about some of the problems specifically, and let's see if we can resolve them one at a time. So again, it's not a linear model where it always goes S-P-I-N. You may start at the I, or you may start at the P. Doesn't matter. My point is that spin allows you to have a questioning model in your head that's easy to remember. Again, what's the situation? General conversation. Within that general conversation, you're listening for what are some of the problems that this customer may have today or will have in the future. Once you identify some of these problems, could be singular or plural, then you talk about, again, what are the implications? And then if we were to make these changes, Mr. Customer, based on your needs, what would be some of the benefits? What would be the upside? Now, I know I'm repeating myself because I really want you to understand the spin model. It's a powerful model. Start implementing it and let me know what you think. All right, this is Victor Antonio with the Sales Influence Podcast. I hope you enjoyed that. That's my second book review I've done on this podcast. So let me know what you think when I do some of these, book reviews in short form. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Let me know what you think because I always do appreciate it. And I do my best to try to answer a lot of the questions that you leave me on YouTube. Also, check out my sales training website, seminarsonselling.com, where you'll find great training videos for you or your teams to help you, grow your business. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.
Every manager can feel it. The difference between a motivated, value-driven sales team and one that's stuck in a rut. CEOs know the difference too. They can see it clearly in the profit and loss columns. The question is, how do you get your team to this elite level? Is there something extra you can do to break through the remaining resistance and equip them with the right mindset to grow your business? Yes, there is. But you're not going to do it with one of those cheesy inspirational speakers or some self-proclaimed guru. What you need is someone with a real business track record to deliver key insights in a captivating way, to give your team the right tools for selling in today's tough marketplace. Enter Victor Antonio, experienced executive, innovative thinker, compelling speaker. He's ready to deliver the message you need your people to hear, not with a canned speech, but a customized, dynamic keynote designed to deliver results. Bring Victor Antonio to your next event before the competition does.